Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Hall. I am the host of The Faces, Entrepreneurs Are People Too, and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and the here-in sponsor of my podcast. So I appreciate you so much for Telehelping and allowing me the opportunity to talk to great folks like Taylor. Taylor, how are you today?
Doing well. Yourself? Always good when it's a Friday.
Right, it's a Friday, right? Heading back to Mexico this weekend. So, you just don't have too much to complain about yet, right? Day's young though, so give it time.
Yeah, make sure you treat them well.
We have a saying in the trading world is don't lose your ass on a Friday. And so and you can go into Friday euphoric, you're like, yes, and then it sweep you. But I generally try to take it light on Friday so that I don't set myself up for too much disappointment.
Nice.
Well, Taylor, before we go too far down the rabbit hole, I know a little bit about you already, but please take an opportunity to introduce yourself to our listeners today.
So, hi, I'm Taylor Meadows. I'm a CPA and the CEO and founder of ChangeCaptain, where we automate compliance and tax incentives for organizations that build software. Essentially, we are connecting into the code repository, automatically gathering all the necessary data, crunching those numbers, and then we use that to then go get essentially free money back from the government, which we just charge a percentage of. So it creates that win-win environment.
Yeah, and I don't think many people who don't work in software think about it, but taxes for software they can be kind of complicated because, well, think about the simple things that we do every day with software, right? If you pay a yearly basis, right, you're paying upfront, they give you a discount for paying upfront, you're giving them cash, right? However, they're going to amortize that over the course of that 12 months. And so recognizing tax and the pieces every bit along the way can get quite complicated.
Yeah. And there's so many different ways you can save money, whether it's you can do R&D tax credits at the federal level, state level, but you can also do what's called tax amortization at the federal level and state level. And kind of for those that don't know what, amortization is essentially where you are kind of almost depreciating your asset. Because if you think about when you're developing software, it's got long-term value. It's not like a piece of fruit that expires in 3 days.
Correct.
So that's where you're able to decrease your taxable income and significantly lower your tax bill.
That's very important. I did a little bit of R&D myself. So when I started my restaurants, I used to go around eating a lot. And so I we used to always joke about it. Me, my chef, and my wife would just be like, "Hey, let's do some R&D." So every morning we would go around and eat. We spent an entire year at eating at every breakfast restaurant, both, fancy, not fancy, traditional brunch, international. And so I definitely wrote every penny that I spent off that entire year because I generally don't like eating out, but I was eating out sometimes twice a day for a whole year,
Mm,
right? And so you want to recoup those costs, and I think that's what people sometimes forget. Software, the amount that goes into getting a piece of software to market is it could be comparable sometimes to, say, pharmaceuticals.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. Like we're talking to one potential client we're looking to onboard where we'd be looking to save them over $100 million in taxes each year
Yeah,
with
correct.
their software development spend. So it really adds up. There's some significant savings that can be had, which is also, of course, why the government is making it exponentially harder to get these savings now. Essentially, every country offers very, very same tax incentives. It's essentially because of global competition. Hey, if we don't offer these same incentives, no one's going to come do engineering work in my country. So everyone pretty much offers the same gig. So the U.S. government can't lower the payout. But what they've done is they've increased the scrutiny required in order to get these tax savings. So starting in 2025, you now are required to prove eligibility for every individual code change in order to get these tax savings now.
Geez. So it's a lot of minor details. So having maybe technology that does that is very helpful.
Yeah, just to give you perspective, a team of 10 engineers on average will make about 9,600 code changes over the course of a year. And that equates to almost 5 million lines of code being modified every year.
Wow. You know, I think about, just yesterday I was thinking about technology and the way it's changed the way I spend my time. I own multiple rental properties and I'm currently in a dispute about a missed payment and outstanding fees according to our contract for a tenant who's been with me for 4 years. And so it's like, well, how do you go back and tabulate every little detail of every time they went $2 over on the electricity bill, right? Normally it would take us going back line by line, right?
Mhm.
Now we have AI software. We have software that we can like, all right, well, this is 2 years worth of statements. These are 2 years worth of bank statements, line for line match everything. So what took maybe an hour to do 4 years worth of review and creating a summary for my tenant would have taken me a day plus. Probably would have just outsourced it to my accountant, to be honest with you, because of how much time it would have taken. And I think that's the beautiful thing about what you're offering. You're like, sure, you could do this. You could also do it and be wildly inaccurate, or you can do it with accuracy and with speed.
Right, and that's the thing is it's making sure that it's auditable and defensible, so you don't end up trying to get these tax incentives and then you get audited and then you end up finding yourself where you're paying, 15% of your revenue, in fees.
Correct. I mean, that's one thing that, we find ourselves as an international organization. We always have to have very defendable circumstances because being that we're a US based company that pays most of our staff in pesos, right? All of our staff in pesos, right? We still have requirements under US law to disclose payments internationally. And so, while rare, knock on wood, right? Right. We still have to track those 1099Bs. Like we have to have all those forms because if we don't, and they come knocking on our door, we have to be able to like, well, actually we paid, Juan Castro X amount of dollars. You don't know who he is, but he's a real person in Mexico. Because one thing that we constantly battle, and we've experienced issues with this before, is we're subject to a lot of scrutiny due to international money laundering protections. And so, we transfer a lot of money every month. And, being an international staffing organization, the accounts we have to do so are highly monitored. And we've been frozen before because we broke our limit, right, one month and didn't, it just happened, right? Took on a big contract and hired a bunch of people who didn't really think about that. And it froze payments for everybody. Everything just stopped. And it's just one of those things that you have to be ahead of the game, or else if you find yourself in the midst of the game catching up with you, it's very painful.
It is, and especially for, like, getting these incentives, you can't really get them retroactively. So, if you are not getting them today, you're not gonna be able to use them. The way it's set up, it's very, very hard to go backwards in time. Honestly, it's pretty much almost impossible to go back in time to get these tax incentives, so you have to get them today, otherwise, you've just that money is essentially burned. You're never gonna get it.
I love that. One thing, government, they want to make things available to you. Something as like carbon tax credits, for example, for farmers. Interesting phenomenon as well. Very difficult. We also had something similar in Mexico where they wanted to start applying at a more scrutinous level the taxes that go on to people who work from Mexico internationally, right? And a lot of folks who are in Mexico, just to give you an idea, 15 or so percent of the disclosed people saying they work for a US based company remotely in Mexico is 15% of the economy, right? 15% of people who have jobs.
Mhm.
We can add another 10%. We can add another 15%, to be honest with you. Work for US international companies. And the government wanted to really crack down on this because, truth be told, there's a good chance that a lot of them aren't disclosing their total net income and they're not paying taxes on it, right? However, they shut that down so quick because the issue is what happens if you halt, 15% of the labor force that spends money every day, that is buying things. It came to a whole really quick. It was the new president who came in. It was the beginning of the year, scared a lot of people, me included. Right? So I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. But luckily, there's a lot of parliament members in Mexico who own companies just like me, at much larger versions of me, who wouldn't allow those type of laws to go through because it would just cripple the economy and also cripple a lot of very affluent people's businesses. So we're glad that they stopped that. But it's little things like that we were worried about, because we're like balancing Mexico and the United States. We got two rules to follow.
Yeah. No, and that definitely adds a lot more complexity, which is challenging for a lot of business owners to figure out how to manage. One of the things you kind of learn is that when you're running a business, I would say running the business is almost like maybe 20 to 30%. And there's so many other things that goes into it that has absolutely nothing to do with your product.
Point well made. And then in commercial for telehelping, to be honest with you, because that's exactly what I spend most of my time convincing clients. Well, I don't have to convince them, framing the solution and value for is I truly tried, and I've done a really great job at Taylor. Is like, I don't really do it if it's not to do with sales. Like if it doesn't have to do with sales, I don't touch it. Right. Everything else, I even have an executive project manager who goes to meetings that I don't want to go to, right? And then provides, what would Cody do perspectives and conversations. And so, and then I get reports at the end of every day of the decisions they made, and then I provide them feedback. But that and the high level problems, I apply the Jeff Bezos approach to thing. I try to make 3 good decisions a day, right? And that way I'm focusing on the growth, and I'm focusing on, being that person, and then making higher level, higher impact decisions. And so you're right. Most of the time as business owner, we get dragged down by the gravity of the business, right? And it wants to pull you. It's problem after problem. I don't know why anybody would ever do this whole entrepreneur thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And being a CPA, I'm very risk adverse. So I am not a typical entrepreneur. I never had a vision or a dream of ever starting my own company. I came up with the idea of ChangeCaptain over 15 years ago, and I was actually trying to buy the product. So I was working with SHI and CDW. They were very large software resellers. And I was explaining to them, all right, here's my problem. Can you go on the market and find me some sort of product solution, help me in this area? And year over year, got nothing. And 1 year I was griping and complaining to now my CTO. And rather than being a good listener, she wanted to be the fixer. And she's like, I think I can build that for you. So she's the one who's kind of the mastermind behind the scenes, who took my broad idea and concept and was able to turn it into an actual functioning product, and kind of brought me along into this entrepreneur journey.
Those people exist, and we always like to think, people always think that Cody is telehelping all the time. And I have, and I do say all the time, I am telehelping. Telehelping is me, right? Because it's, your company. But, we think of Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, and all these people who, Elon Musk is notorious for being like the spotlight credit grabber, right? But if I were to be honest, like there's so many people in my organization over time that have really made it possible. Because I'd say one of the biggest challenges for us was, managing cultural differences, right? How do you manage a person who is Mexican in an environment, a professional environment of the United States? And right, so there's this translation of that goes on nonstop through our account managers. And we had someone earlier on who made that possible, because before it's like, well, how do you tell someone in the United States not to do something is one thing, but we find that sometimes having conversations in Spanish from a very Mexican perspective, and kind of working through that is the same way. So it's like, I had an idea, like I'm going to hire inexpensive folks in Mexico with great talent, and I'm going to use them in my US company. And that's a great idea, but going to market, right? It took someone between that idea.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that adds a lot of complexity in businesses. It's not just translating between 2 different languages, but from 2 different types of skill sets and work involved. So, like in my background, one of the big issues that I've always seen is the finance and accounting org and executives, those who are non-technical individuals, have a very, very tough time having any idea of what's happening in the engineering org.
Yeah.
They don't know how to code, and it's just like, okay, they're working on something, but they don't know really what's going into it, what the time's involved, what they're actually working on. And that's where within our product we're looking to bridge that gap, where we're able to essentially break down what the engineering org is doing, and almost like a stock portfolio, so you can see all these metrics that you're used to seeing, you're used to working with, being on the finance, accounting, executive side of the house, without having to understand how to code. Now you're understanding, okay, how much money did this project take versus this project? You're getting really, really granular detail at that code level so you can understand what is actually happening in your own house.
Yeah, that's and that is a process that many people have to fail with at first. Being in a oftentimes very rare, do you have engineers running engineering companies or software companies?
Right.
They do exist, right? However, Elon Musk would be a great example of someone who understands much of the engineering that goes into making his businesses work. However, they're very rare to have that mindset at his level, and then you can see the type of person he is, right? And we have clients who we have a lot of clients actually who oftentimes are those engineering software accountant based folks who have that mindset, and they hire like marketing virtual staff members or sales members because they know their product, they know their direction, and we're trying to do it. They're just oftentimes not the person to manage what that outward appearance is. So hiring outside your competency is very important. So I imagine having someone like yourself come in with the software and the accounting perspective, and then an understanding of the engineering makes it great to be honest with you as a partner.
Exactly. And that's the thing. We really make it easy where at the end of the day, no one cares about taxes or compliance. It's not a fun topic,
Yeah,
but people like the free money. So that's where it's essentially like, hey, install this in this app. It's like installing an app on your phone. We install it into the code repository. We automatically collect the data and go get you your money from the government. You don't have to understand how any of it works. You just it's a 1 hour setup process, and then we hand you a check at the end of the year.
I like that. And so, shifting gears real quick, right? Because it's not too often that I jump right into the business side of things. We just kind of teed up that way, to be honest with you. And this is a very free flowing podcast, but I'm interested, when you're not, crunching numbers and saving people big on taxes in the tech world, well, what do you do? What do you like
Um,
for fun? What's outside of the world for you?
so right now, running ChangeCaptain, there's not a whole lot of work-life balance, sadly. But
Happens.
prior to this, I used to play a lot of golf. I actually played golf competitively starting at age of 7, and I actually played with Jordan Spieth growing up. Again, he was just another competitor at the time. Don't
Yeah,
Wasn't anyone special, but yeah, I was looking at potentially playing professionally. My sister actually ended up playing professionally for 7 years, and I got to see that life of how difficult and how much traveling she was doing, and how it was just like you've got to make sure that you're winning in order to get enough winnings to keep your tour card.
correct.
And I was never as good as her. I was only ranked like in the 130s. Spieth was like 33 at the time. And I was just like, I don't know if this is for me. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be good enough for this to be my career. So that's why I decided to not play golf in college, turn down my scholarships, and just get a normal degree in accounting and finance to get a normal job.
I'm just gonna go the regular route. And that is, I I loosely play some very high level tennis, and so most of the folks I play with will compete in open level matches. And if they really wanted to, I'm sure they'll beat me. I'm as good once as they are on an average day, right? And so they're fun to play with. They entertain me. But some of these folks, one of the guys I play with, he's a young 18-year-old player, right? And so, he, plays in San Diego Opens. He's, been a tennis player his entire life. Recently had to make the decision, right? Do I want to, go out here and compete for my proness, right? Which you have to can do all the time. And just for the record, like getting into tournaments is not free, right?
Mhm.
You have to pay to get into tournaments. So you have to pay to play, to win, to play. So it's a
Right.
vicious cycle. And so, or, does he take a scholarship at Howard University as a full ride and play for Howard tennis, where she will get a great education and be able to have, sustainable future. And maybe if he does amazing in college, still gets to go off and be a tennis player. Right.
Mhm.
And so you have to make those decisions sometimes. I myself, when I was graduating high school, I used to be a really good wrestler, right? And I had to make the decision where like, well, am I going to wrestle in college? Which oftentimes, if you're a college athlete and you're trying to go somewhere, you do like the communications degree, right?
Right.
You're not doing a degree of, and there are people out there that go out and become doctors and they're pre-med, and they're also, I'm not that guy. That's not me. right?
Correct.
I'd be barely passing the communications degree.
And that's exactly what I was looking at. I was like, if I decide to pursue playing golf professionally, I'm probably going to end up getting some sort of communications degree, something that is going to be a lot more difficult to get a job in
Hmm.
if golf doesn't pan out. And that's kind of where I was concerned is like, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. This better work, otherwise I'm kind of up a creek. So that's why I decided to kind of change my trajectory after kind of seeing my sister go through it and
Smart.
kind of go the more the traditional route.
That's a smart route. I was in the military for quite a bit of time, and once I got medically retired, I was like going out into the world. And there's good things about being medically retired because you're retired technically, right? And
Uh,
so you really get a what am I gonna do kind of mentality, and it gives you a perspective of kind of really. You don't have to do what you don't want to do because you're already kind of retired. Like you're
mhm.
getting a pension, right? And you're sitting there at 29 years old, right? And I never thought I was going to, because I got retired from the reserves after a while, but I already had my career. I had been an executive for many years. And I didn't really think much about it until I sold the company and I started saying, like, what do I want to do with my hobbies? Like now I was just talking to one of my friends, I was asking, like, I don't think I like working that much. Right. I'm like, I like what I do and I love my company. I love working with people and, being in the marketing and sales side of the business is great. Owning your own business in spite of all its challenges. If I'm going to work for an idiot, I'm going to be that idiot. Right. I love that. However, it really gets you in a position of like, well, I don't really need to do what I don't want to do. That's a beautiful thing. And your organization, if you're fairly young, right? So you're fighting for every nickel and dime right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Not there
but
yet.
yeah, but I mean, the nice thing is that, like, a lot of people do fear retirement, because they worry about, like, what are you gonna do? The thing is, just because you're retired, what it's really doing is you are having the freedom to pick and choose what you want to spend your time on. And that could mean going back into work and working on a new project.
Yeah.
Like, for example, we have 19 patent claims on ChangeCaptain, but we're already getting another 20 patents in the payment card space. That way, once we finish with this company and we eventually sell it off later in the future, then we'll just roll right into the next one.
Correct. And I love that that's where telehelping came from. Telehelping didn't even have a name when it started. Like it was nothing. It was just a company that existed in Mexico because I was running a healthcare technology company that implemented AI to understand the acuity of patients and care pathways. And I supported the machine learning model with nurses. And so I was like, well, I didn't really need real nurses in the United States to have RN license. They're all nurses, backtracking there. They're all nurses, but US based licensed nurses. Right? I just needed the nurse mentality. Right. And so I
Right.
was like, well, I was paying, I don't know, god awful amount, almost $3,000 a month for nurses out of the Philippines. And I was like, I bet I can do this in Mexico for cheaper. And so we started it, and then 4 years later, it became its own business. Right when I sold the company, I was like, oh, I still own this company. I still have this contract. Like we should do something with this. But we should make this a company. And then we rebranded to telehelping.
Nice.
Before it was just like a call center company that we called telehelp, and it didn't mean anything, to be honest with you. But that I'm sure that's going to be simply like the patents that you have, is they may seem really insignificant today, but it could be something, the basis of an entire company later on.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, trying to set it up where we kind of almost have our moat around Change Captain. And then the same idea is once we're, done with Change Captain, we move on to the next, we kind of already have our moat ready to go into the development of the next company.
And how long has ChangeCaptain been around?
We started development on it probably about a little over 2 years ago.
Okay.
Um, and it's been a long journey coming. We just started onboarding customers back in December. So been getting some really good traction, helping save organizations a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, it's one of those things people like it. It's risk free. If we don't save you any money, you don't pay anything. And then executives are really liking it because one of the things I haven't talked about is we're automating what's called cap labor reporting. Essentially, it's where you're aligning your expenses with that revenue that's coming in. what that allows you to do is increase your EBITDA, which a lot of executives' bonuses are tied to that EBITDA number. So
Correct.
everyone likes getting that new pair of shoes.
Right. Yeah, yeah. You know, gotta earn. Maybe you earn a quarterly car, right? Depending on what executive you are.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because and I think there's a lot of folks who we support at our organization that may watch this podcast that are in the AI world, a lot of coding, right? And so they're not thinking about this because they're such a small company, and it's probably to them it's like, well, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, Taylor just said it. He doesn't charge anything unless he saves you money, and
Yeah.
so it's a shared savings model, right? And so
Exactly. And
where
it's
there's no
just
harm.
exactly. And it's designed where it's all automated. There is no work. You don't have to understand how the process works. You install it, forget about it, and then we get you your money. And even if you're, a startup, again, like I said, even if you're not making money today, this is where you're able to get these credits. So when you do start making money in the future, when you do start getting a bigger tax bill, you're able to essentially not pay taxes anymore. In addition, if you have employee payroll taxes, you're able to use these credits and savings against that employee payroll tax. So even before you ever start making profit, you're starting to be able to use these savings.
Yeah, you have to carry over your credits, right? I carry credits all. I originally started trading about 3 years ago. My first year, I was negative. Like I lost money on
Hmm.
my day trading. I carried it over. It doesn't matter to me. The money to me, I almost see the money as it's there
Right.
to me because for dollar, if I carried over X thousands dollars, I'm like, great, that's X thousands dollars that I'm not gonna have to pay taxes on next year, right? And then roll it over and apply. And so it's smart.
Exactly. And the thing is like, for a lot of organizations, they're not planning on, running it forever. At some point in time, you're looking to sell. And this is where this becomes an asset on your book. So even if you haven't made use of these credits, but you have them, well, now that's an asset that a future acquirer is able to utilize. So, like
Right.
in my career in the past, I would look at organizations that had, often they were unprofitable organizations. I wasn't going to use their software or their product. I wasn't basically going to have anything to do with that company. I was acquiring them specifically for these tax incentives. That way I can make use of their tax savings for my organization.
Sure. And that's just a strategic acquisition,
Yeah.
right? And so, we had that come around. A lot of companies, call centers specifically, like big box call centers, are moving from Mexico to like Honduras, like El Salvador, which completely makes sense because most time big box means low competency, high management level, which we divested from ourselves. And so we sold the call centers to a strategic acquisition that was moving it to Honduras. And that was nice because if you've ever ran a call center, you'll understand that they are very difficult. And we had six of them. And we, at that point in time, we went all virtual. And so now we just retain all of our virtual staff. But, getting rid of that, man, it made our P&L look so beautiful, right? No more fixed overhead for large buildings and software and IT and
Mhm.
insurance and permits, all these things that go in, even the occasional getting shook down by the local people in Mexico, like all that had to go away, right? Because we didn't have a physical location anymore. There's all types of purposes for those acquisitions. That's great. Taylor, you have a really interesting background, right? You don't get too much time outside the office, but I'm sure that you're going to make your way back into the golf course because aren't deals made on the golf course?
And that's what they say. So I definitely have already had plenty of meetings on the golf course. So I can say, yeah, they definitely happen there.
Yeah. And does your shooting game, does it win you any favoritism? Like this guy can drive.
I'd say sometimes it's good and bad because, people are like, I don't know if I want to play against someone who's that good. So, but the thing is, at this point, like I'm nowhere near as good as what I used to be. When I go play golf at this point, it's for fun.
Yeah.
I'm not competing in a tournament anymore. I mean, back in the day, I used to have a -4 handicap. Well, now I would probably shoot, 82, 84. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
nowhere near the same caliber as what I used to be. But that's
Uh,
fine. I'm just, I'm there to have fun.
no, I played tennis with an investor, former CEO of mine, and He was always trying to get me on the tennis court. I was like, all right, well, I'll go play tennis with you. And he was talking about how he was a 3.5. I was like, okay, 3.5 is a really good high end, just, everyday player. If you're playing 3.5, you're a really good everyday tennis player, right? And so I started playing with him, and I realized he wasn't a 3.5, right? And I'm more closer to a 4. And so, but I died back on him on purpose because I didn't want to crush the guy. I wasn't trying to sour my own deal. So I pulled back a little bit, intentionally didn't hit the shots that I knew could win me points just to keep the volley going, right? Because it's for bonding more so than it is for anything else.
Exactly. I mean, there's nothing to be had for, winning. And like I said, I don't even have to honestly worry about that these days because I'm not that good anymore. But no, I mean, it's like anything in life. If you're not enjoying it, you're not having fun, you really have to ask yourself why are you doing it in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Myself, we own restaurants, and I was telling my wife we're in the process of taking LOIs and acquisitions because it was a beautiful thing to do, and they are very profitable. That's great and everything, but it's like one of those things where is it fun to be involved in? And the answer is oftentimes no, because restaurants are, they're either doing really well or there's something happening, right? There's something. It's either has to do with personnel or permits at all times, right? And so it's just one of those things like it makes money, but does it make enough money for it to be worth your pain is always the question.
Exactly. A lot of businesses like restaurants operate on very, very small margins,
Mhm.
3 to 5% margins. It's a lot of work. It's a big headache. A lot of people, kind of idolize the idea of, oh, I'm going to open up my own restaurant, not realizing the amount of work that goes into actually operating and running and managing and
Correct.
staffing. There's a huge amount of work that goes into that.
Correct. It's I was joking with my mom's like, oh, well, your wife she's just never even do anything. She's just always hanging out and around. I'm like, well, give her a break, right? She just gave birth, right? And before that, she ran a restaurants 7 days a week for almost 2 years, right? And that is a horrible existence, right? You're up far before it opens, and you're not
Hmm.
going home when the door's shut, right? And so kudos to her for the work. I'm like, let her sit around. She deserves it, right? It's her sabbatical.
Yeah.
Like let her breathe out. And I don't know how your client management goes into place, but one of the biggest things that we focus on telehelping is to avoid what we refer to as red flag clients. And
Mhm.
so we just don't take clients that we think are going to be excessive drama, right?
Mhm.
We want good clients, and so we won't just drop people. We give everyone opportunities, but we don't retain people and even be bendable with our rules if we don't think they're good clients, and we generally don't work hard to get clients that we think are going to be difficult clients because the company just runs smoother that way.
Right.
My staff is happier. I have one less fire to deal with per day, right? The thing is you could take not all money is good money, right? You can take every client that possibly comes at you, but sometimes you have to ask yourself, is it going to impact the thing I love doing? And so
Right.
I try to protect that by taking on clients that I'm going to enjoy working with.
Yeah. And I think that's where it's important to kind of align goals and incentives. Like for us, the fact that we only charge percentage of what we're able to save them. If you decide one day, hey, I just don't want to use the software anymore, okay, that's fine. You're not going to, pay us, but at the same time, you're also not going to get the savings. So
Correct.
is that really what you want to do? I mean, if yes, then that's fine. There's no bad blood.
No,
At the end of the day, we're here to help you get this money, to help you get these savings. We're here to help.
correct. And I appreciate that too, because that's mentality you have to have. I think that's in the when you're in the support business, right? Your job is to ultimately render a greater outcome to your partner, right? And that's not always the case for vendors, right? It's, sometimes you're primarily focused on you making money. And if they're subscription based, right, you just want them to keep paying, right? Not necessarily do they need to have the value. You just don't want them to cancel the subscription or
Mhm.
keep their license count, right? But if you're in the business of, you either add value or there is no value, right? That's just one of those beautiful things to be in. that's, I tell my staff all the time is like, if, we're not here to make the entrepreneur's life easier, people who run these business, then we don't have a place in this world.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where you're at with your organization. If you're not saving money, you're not making money. So
Exactly. If you're not getting, a bag of money at the end of the year, you're not paying us anything. And the thing is, you're not even paying us until you get that bag of money.
love it. I love it. Well, Taylor, that's a beautiful mindset to go to. And, where is the organization at now? Or, you're taking on clients, or have you done seed rounds? Are you bootstrapping? What's the organization look like there?
Yeah, so right now we are entirely bootstrapped. We
Wonderful.
are looking at some strategic investors, and then it's depending on how that goes, we'll look more seriously into fundraising come Labor Day, just because now we're starting to move into kind of the dead months. Everyone's going to be going on vacation here soon with the summer break. But our big thing right now is we just recently partnered with IBM, so they've been helping to continue to improve the product, helping to actually help not only with the development of the product, but is also helping with the co-branding, co-selling of it, which is really nice to have that, that big trustworthy name behind us as, a startup, because in our world, trust and credibility is everything. So being able
Correct.
to bring a behemoth like IBM to the table is worth its weight in gold.
That's great. And yes, using someone curtailing on someone else's credibility as a young startup is very important. Our first big client was Anthem Healthcare, right? And when we had them, I threw their name around all the time. Like, you should trust us. Anthem trusts us. So are you Anthem? I used to always be like, well, sure, we're Mexico, but Anthem trusts us. Do you? And that went a long way. And it's great that you had that partnership. I bet that was hard fought.
It was. We managed to actually get the partnership through an introduction after we won. It's called a Finance, Accounting, and Technology Conference in New York City last year. I think it was September timeframe. They had a little pitch competition that we entered. And while I speak regularly at different events, I've never done pitching before. So
It's
that
fun.
was a very, very new world. And it was different. It was fun. It was enjoyable. So it was after we won the competition, we ended up getting some intros into some executives at IBM who kind of opened up those doors and those opportunities and really kicked off our, not just a partnership, but really moving into a true relationship.
That's great. No, I love pitching, right? Pitching is so much. You can speak all day, but when you're getting up in front of someone where your sole purpose is to convey and convince, right? That's a well fought challenge depending on who's in your audience. And I've pitched from rooms full of people down to billionaires. It's gone really well. It's gone really poor. So
Yeah.
I remember once I had a billionaire get up and just start packing his stuff. And the worst part is it was just me and him. I was just pitching to him and I had some people from the introduction who assigned the conversation and brought it together. They're all sitting in the same conference room. I went all the way to, Santa Barbara to this guy's, estate to chat with him. And it was like 5 minutes, started standing up. He's like, yeah, let's go to dinner. I was like, okay. I have about 30 more minutes, but all right, let's do this. Let's just leave. And so eventually it went really well. Dinner went really well. Ended up getting the investment, right? His biggest thing is apparently he already knew all he wanted to know before he even sat down with me. He just wanted to see who I was and went to dinner, and that's how it was discovered. However, that time when I saw him packing up and you're talking and someone's packing up, you're like, this is not going well. It's freaking out.
And I think that's the important part is to remember when you're pitching, you are just trying to get to that next conversation. You are not going to be closing that deal no matter how well that pitch goes right then and there. So getting to the fact that, oh, let's go have dinner, you've just succeeded. You've
Correct.
moved into the next phase.
Yeah. It was less than fun. But he ended up being a great guy. Still very, very wonderful person I can stay connected with. Well, Taylor, I'm excited for your organization and I'm excited for what you're achieving. I love, 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 love companies who go at risk, right? Because there's nothing better, because that's Activa Healthcare. company I started and exited, we were all about we either made money or you didn't pay us. And so what a model, stressful model to be on, because you really have to be able to perform. So, for those who are listening, how would they get in contact with you? Because the one thing great about a lot of folks that are listening here, most of our audience identifies as technology-based, finance-based people, funny enough. And so if they're sitting here like, well, I think, I code, how do I get in contact with this guy? I wouldn't mind taking some software that's free until I make money. How would they connect with you?
Yeah, so on our website at www.changecaptain.co, you can book a demo. You can see how the product works. Or if you want to email me directly, my email is taylor.meadows@changecaptain.co. Happy to meet with you, show how easy it is. Again, you don't need to understand all the taxes and all the nuances that go into it. Just install the app, forget about it, and we'll get you your money.
I like it. Well, Taylor, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, sir. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and then obviously a happy weekend as well.
Thank you. You as well. Have a good weekend.
Be well, sir.
Appreciate it.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.